Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to make a start. So my name is Nikki Kimball. I'm part of the education team here at Just Too Easy. And in this week's webinar, we're going to be looking at bringing stories to life and introduction to animation with JIT Animate. So animation, probably one of my favourite things to teach with. So a bit of session housekeeping before we get started. We are planning a 45-minute session. So I'm going to try and be done by UK time, 4:15. However, if you do need to go at any point, don't worry, the session is being recorded and will be made accessible via YouTube. And also for our British international schools out there, we will be making these recordings available via the web page, which you'll be sent details via email later on in the week. The session is designed to be fairly interactive. So we've checked the chat function luckily is working. So thank you to those of you that have popped chats in there for me. So you can ask questions as we go along. So please just pop those in the chat. I do have it open on my second screen, which is why I keep intermittently looking over to my left or right, whichever side it is. It's my right, whether it looks like it's my right on the screen, I don't know. But I will also be doing a Q&A session at the end of the training. So if there's anything that I haven't covered that you want to know a little bit more about, you can ask those towards the end of the session. We're getting more and more people jumping in as we sort of carry on to make a slow start. Right, today's session. So as I said, it's geared all around animation and JIT Animate. And I really tried to brainstorm how best to sort of show this to you. So I've done it in quite a methodical kind of way, logical way. I'm going to start the session by thinking about how to plan your animations, because animation isn't one of those things that you just kind of get out and miraculously make a wonderful animation. It's much like creating a story. You know, there's a planning process to follow. So we're going to start with that planning process of how you can plan the animations, and we're going to have a look at some library or a library resource that we have available for you to use for that purpose. So I'll show you how to use that. Then we're really going to get into the how to use JIT Animate. So I'm going to show you the interface, how to find it and the interface, you know, what all the buttons do, how they work. And we're going to look at editing the background, adding frames, adding and moving characters, utilizing what we call onion skinning, and adding freeze frames and speech bubbles. So we are going to go through sort of the basic functionality of the tool itself. And then we're going to carry on. We're going to do a little bit of more advanced stuff. So if you do feel free, if once I've done my animation, if you want to just head off, you can. But for those of you that really want to start personalizing, getting the best out of JIT Animate, I've also planned to do a little section on how to create your own characters in JIT Paint. That you can then use and animate. So that's a really nice activity. And how you can create a JIT mix document to present those animations. So that's kind of, you know, the skills progression for those, maybe those older students or for those more able students. Then I'm going to show you where you can find some follow-up training and support. And as always, our question time towards the end. Okay, so lots to get through, as always. So let's have a look. Planning and animation. So as I said earlier, it's much like with your writing or creating stories with your students in non-digital ways. You're not just going to, get your pen and paper out and let the kids start writing a story straight off the bat. There are certain processes where you have to support them to think about maybe things they're going to include, elements of their story, how they're going to write that or how they're going to create that. And animation is very much the same. Okay, so we are presenting a visual representation of a story. So planning your animation, there is only one storyboard. I have noted this, so I sort of noticed this afternoon. I am going to create a few more storyboards, I think, later in the week when I actually get some time. But this is the one that we do have. Okay, and you can see here I've used this storyboard template. So this can be done digitally or non-digitally. So you could print this out and get the children to maybe, draw their animation or draw a sort of stick frame representation of, what they're going to create in their animation. And there's some space underneath to write some lines. So that might be some speech. It might be some description of what's going on in that particular part of the story. So you can print that out or you can do it digitally. And this is found in our library. Okay, so once you log in to Just Too Easy, this is our launch pad. And you can see up here, we've got our Just Too Easy library. Okay, sometimes it gets missed. That's why I like to point it out to everyone. So we're going to open that, and there's about 3,000 resources in here, so it's not a small tool. So there's all sorts of things, and also you can look for animation. So I think if I look for animate, let's have a look. There will be some pre-existing animation projects that you can have a look at, that you can use for the children to have a go at. So these are a great starting point if you are brand new to animation. Okay, but that wasn't what I was going to show you. So I'm going to look for storyboard, and here we go. So this is the template here. Clearly these two resources have an option to add that storyboard as a sort of part of an activity. So what I can do, I can open that storyboard. This is the library resource that gives you a little sort of title, instructions on how to use it, and teacher notes. So obviously the teachers, the pupils can't see teacher notes, only teachers can. And this is what the storyboard template looks like. So we'll open up in J2 Create. Okay, so the children, they have the option here to draw if they want to. They can click anywhere and add some text. So it could be, I don't know, jungle animation. They can double click, they can move that text around. So we can pop that over there. They can also add in pictures. So I am going to show you how to create a picture in JIT Paint a little bit later after we've done Animate. But it can be that once you save those little images, so you can see here, this is an image from JIT Paint, you can add those as images into your template there. So it could be that the children use JIT Paint to kind of loosely plan out the various aspects of their animation. Save those as images and then import them into the storyboard template. So if you did want to do it digitally, that is an option as well. Okay, now just to highlight, just leave that. Children can only access these library resources when you share them. So we have the share button here. Okay, you can share individually with the students. So if you've got a really tiny class, you could, choose your sort of 5 or 6 students. If you've got a slightly bigger class, you've got your classes tab and you can set that for that particular class. So when I click OK, they will find that in the library area, and they can then use that as their planning template. If you did want to print it off, just open up the template and you'll notice at the top of the page you've got that print button, so you can print that off. That's in portraits. You might need to sort of play around with how it's set up, but that is our landscape print page. Okay, so that is how you would print it instead if you don't want to do it non-digitally. So that is the planning section of the webinar. Okay, let's get into what we're all here for. We're going to look at JIT Animate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a very basic animation, and then I'm going to sort of talk about how we can incorporate that into your literacy side of things, thinking about planning stories. And this is what the interface looks like. So JIT Animate is part of our JIT toolkit, which has 8 other tools in it. So we are going to look at Paint and Mix after this. And this is what the interface looks like. So you can see here, we've got our animation in the middle. So this is our screen. So we've got our background button at the bottom. We've got our play button here. We've got our frames reel. We've got our editing animation tool. So if anybody's familiar with Paint already, you'll notice the interface is almost exactly the same as Paint. So that's great for transferring those skills to students. How I would teach it, I would get the students confident using JIT Paint first, which is another argument for planning the storyboard and using JIT Paint, because they familiarise themselves with where the editing tools are, and it's very consistent. So you'll find that. Then you've got all your file tools at the top. Again, that stays consistent throughout all the JIT tools. So we've got our save button and our publish to journal button. If anybody is using journal, you've got that. Along the top, you've got your file rename and your record sound button if you wanted. And then top right, we've got export as GIF, which I'll look at in a second. And then finally, we've got our onion skinning, which I'm going to talk about in a bit more detail now. Okay, now it might be obvious, but if you've never used animation before with your class, we're using a type of animation called stop frame animation. So there's lots and lots of different tools for this. You can get plug-in camera tools that take photographs, much like Wallace and Gromit, but it is the same principle as Wallace and Gromit, which the kids seem to like. And the idea with animation is that you take a number of different pictures and you run them together so quickly that the eye can't see that. The eye thinks that they are watching something that is moving. It's not. It's just that the pictures are run together very, very quickly. Okay. So that's the principle behind animation. So as I said, we've got paint, so that you can see we've got all of our paint tools, we've got our sort of choosing a background tool, and then we've got animate. So you can see the interface is almost identical. It's just the kind of the surround page color is a different color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a blank background, but there are various backgrounds that we can choose from. So I'm going to show you a very simple animation activity that I used to use to teach my children the basics of animation. So I'm going to choose this blank background to start with. Okay, and I've got my paint brush, and you can see it's a red dot. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that red dot a bit bigger. Okay, and I always used to teach this as an activity and get the children to fine-tune their animation skills and then transfer it to a more complex animation. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a ball bounce. Okay, so we've got our frames along the bottom. We're not going to worry about the background. We're not going to worry about any of these clip art tools just yet. We're going to have our ball kind of start here on the side, and I'm just going to click where I want it on my page. If I go wrong, I've got my undo tool, and that will take that away. I can also use the eraser tool as well. So the undo tool at this point is probably easier, but you do have those at the tool as well. And you'll notice my frame is down here, and I've got my little red dot you can see in the sort of corner of that frame. Okay, and I've already got 5 preset frames, so I'm going to click on the next frame, and you'll see we've got this ghost red button here. Okay, so that is what we call onion skinning. It gives you an idea of where your character was in the previous frame. And then what you're going to do is you're going to click quite close to that onion skinning, but not completely the same. Okay, so we want to move it ever so slightly. So you can see I've moved it to the right ever so slightly. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to click on the next frame. We're going to move it down and to the right a little bit. Next frame, down and to the right. Next frame, down to the right. Now I'm going to do this a little bit quicker, just to give you an idea what we can sort of create. But what we get is we've got our 5 frames, and then we've got nothing. So we need to add a new frame, and that is where our buttons come in here. So we've got this green plus, red cross, and red plus. So we're going to start with the green plus. So that is add a frame. And you can see that's added another frame. So I'm just going to keep doing that process. I'm going to click green plus, click green plus, click green plus, click. You get the point. Okay. And then I can reflect on that activity or that animation by clicking on my play button. And there we go. We've got our inching ever so slowly red ball. Okay, now we can make that quicker or slower. So at the bottom, we've got our frames per second. So at the moment, it's quite a slow frames per second. So I can click and make it faster. There we go. So it looks a little bit more like a falling ball. I could make it even faster if I wanted to. And that's a bit better. Okay, so obviously for some animations, slower looks better. For other animations, faster looks better. So that is kind of how I would get my students to start animating and get them to, have the ball come up and then bounce back off again. I can guarantee what your children will probably do the first time that they do this, if you, allow them that time to experiment, is they're going to add a frame, they're going to put a dot over here, then they're going to add a frame, then put a dot over here, add a frame, put a dot over here. And that's going to look, quite frankly, awful, as you can see. So just allow your children time to make those mistakes. And it's much like coding. You want them to kind of debug and figure out where they've gone wrong and how they can improve it and make it look better. Okay. Now, if they have gone wrong, as you can see here, that is where our red cross comes in. So we can delete that frame. We can delete that frame when we went horribly wrong and delete that frame. So those are our remove frames. We've got add frame and remove frame. I'm going to add a couple more. Here we go. Now, the other thing that you can do, and it really depends on the size of your device that you're using with your students, is sometimes, especially with the smaller devices like the iPad, I think iPad minis are sort of, they've had their time, but I think some schools are still trying to use them. So you do have the option here, this little white, in fact, I'm going to zoom in, this little white button here along the right. That removes the frames reel at the bottom, so you can still animate. It means you can animate underneath the frames reel, because sometimes, as I said, with the small devices, that frames reel can almost take up a third or almost like a half of the animation screen, and you don't want that. And there we go. So that's how we can animate underneath that frames reel. So that is a very, very simple animation to kind of teach the children those discrete skills of animating, moving an object, and placing it, stamping it, moving to the next frame. So then we can rename that. So we could have ball falling, for example. You've also got the record audio function at the top if you wanted to, but then we're going to click this save button. So the save button is the orange floppy disk. The children get that saving feature, so they get the feedback that something's happening. And you'll also notice that the save button has almost grayed out. So it's onion skinning of the save button. But that's really useful, especially for those, I always bang on about younger students, but I think it is quite, unless you've taught the little ones, you don't realise how difficult it is sometimes. You can say to them, have we got a ghost save button? Yes, then you can close your laptop down. So all these little features really help when you're teaching, classes of 30 to make sure that they have saved their work before they click and lose it. So that is how they can create a very simple animation. So that's quite different to this. So let's have a look at making a more complex animation. Okay, so I'm going to click new, and that's going to bring up my backgrounds box. So just to highlight a few of these, so if I scroll down, we've got all sorts. So we've got desert island, we've got space. So if you wanted to make a space story or a jungle story, there are lots and lots of backgrounds for you to choose from. Some of the Christmas ones are quite nice. Even this Christmas one isn't particularly Christmassy, can be used, if you're doing things like the Arctic or the Antarctic or explorers as a topic. That can be quite a nice one to use. And then we've got the map at the bottom. As well as that, if you are working with older students, or you just want to make a slightly different looking animation, do you have the option, you've got pictures tab along the top, and you can see here I've got some images that I've added into my files earlier. So I can add content that I've already saved. I can add photographs by taking a photo. I'm not going to click that because you'll see all the junk behind me. You've also got the choose file. So this might be that you've got something saved on your school server or on the laptop hard drive, so you can choose a file. And then lastly, you've got this button here. So this, I'm going to zoom in just so you can see. This little globe button is very useful. So for example, we might be doing a jungle animation, which we are in a couple of weeks' time via live lesson if you want to join us. So there we go, we've got some lovely jungle backgrounds. So we can make that animation look really quite different. Okay, I'm going to give you some examples of that a bit later. But that is how you could change how it looks. Maybe make it look a little bit more grown up for the older students, or just a little bit more different if you're doing a specific topic, for example. But for today's session, I am going to choose the jungle background because I quite like some of the clip art that goes with it. Okay, so we've got our background. Now, the first thing that you can do, and you can do this subsequently, but I find it easier to do it this way around, is we can edit our background. So our background obviously is the static picture in the background. We don't have to use it as it is. We can start adding certain elements to it. And the way that we can do that is to click on this box at the bottom. So when I click on it, can you see I've got my blue box around it? So that just means I'm editing that background. And we can use all of the functionality that we have in JIT Paint to change the background. So we've got our 11 preset colours and our eraser tool. Okay, so again, for your little ones, you might just want to change this to blue. Okay, and we've got the brush and the fill tool, so we could fill that in. In fact, I've done that wrong. Let's do that the other way. There we go. So I could fill that in so it's nice and blue. Okay, easy enough. Then I've also got these two buttons that you may or may not notice. Okay, so this one here on the left, this one is 3D texture tool, and this one here on the right, this allows us to select a color that's already used, so it's a color picker, and it also allows us to choose any color on the color wheel. So we'll start with the 3D texture tool first of all, and then we'll have a look at the other colors. So to open that up, you can see I've got my little white, tiny little white roller button in the top, in the bottom right. So I'm going to click on that, and that's going to bring up our 3D texture tool. So there's lots of textures to choose from. You can see there's some nice bark textures, some leaves. This one's quite nice for water. We've got bricks, and then some more patterns as we kind of, you know, scroll on down. So I'm going to stick with these sort of live textures. So I'm going to choose some bark. And I can paint with the bark, so I can use that as a paintbrush. So there you go. Make that a bit bigger and you can see it a bit better. Okay, so you can paint with it. You can change how intense that texture is. But you can also fill with it. So I'm going to use the fill tool, and I'm just going to fill in these trees, so it looks like they're made out of bark, which can be a little bit fiddly with how thin they are. There we go, I've done that quite well. And there we go. So we've got our bark. Let's go for some, let's change this water. There we go. So I've got some water, and I might just put some leaves. So let's choose this. And this is what I was saying about this sort of frames reel sometimes can get in the way. So I can use that button along the right, and I can just click underneath. And that is going to allow me to edit what's underneath that frames reel. And then I can click that button and it'll bring my frames reel back. So that is kind of using the paint tools. Then I've also got my clip art. Then what I will say is, when animating, especially with the younger children, using the clip art as characters is much, much easier. So I sometimes see teachers, and hats off to them, trying to do hand-drawn animations. Now really that's quite a high level skill, and something that I would probably do with maybe my year 5s and 6s, which is your P6s and 7s if you're joining us from Scotland and Northern Ireland, and doing sort of stick figure moving animations, because it really takes a lot of logical reasoning. Whereas the clip art, they can just stamp it, change a frame, stamp it, change a frame. So we can use the clip art in the background, but I would try and keep the animations fairly simple in terms of not making it too cluttered, because then sometimes it can be difficult to see which character and where they're moving. So sometimes I put a cap on how many clip art characters they can add in the background, but it's entirely up to you. So depending on which background you've chosen will determine which clip art library has been selected. So I've chosen a jungle background, so we've got our rainforest clip art. So I can use these arrows on the right and left hand side, and it will sort of scroll through those clip arts. So very easy. So you can just use these arrows. Now it might be that you want to use a different clip art library, in which case we can click on that, whatever that word is. So for me it's rainforest. If you were doing space, it might be space. You get the idea. So I've got rainforest, and I've got lots and lots of different clip arts that I can choose from. So I've got aliens, dinosaurs, fairy tales, there's some people, plants, mini beasts, space, transport, shapes, weather, underwater, rainforest, e-safety, polar regions, beaches. So all sorts, especially I know our COBE schools are going to be looking at climate change. So there are quite a few clip art libraries that you can kind of flip between. So it could be that you choose forest and polar region and beach and people. So there's lots of things that you can choose from. Now I'm going to stay within the rainforest. So I'm going to click through here. So I might have I love my sloth. Here we go. Let's pop him in. So I'm going to make him a little bit smaller. So I've got my plus and minus buttons, and I'm just going to add him up the top there with his lovely smiley face. I might add a frog, and I can make that much smaller. So I'm going to add my frog in here. I might, so that's too small to see now. So I'm going to use my little reset button here in the top left. And I should have some plants somewhere if I keep clicking. There we go. I knew I had them somewhere. So I can start adding in some plants as well. And my little, whatever that is. And we'll add him over there. And then I might just have one parrot. There. Okay. So as I said, I don't want my background to be too cluttered for when I'm animating. But that is how you can use all of these tools to dictate or to edit your background. So that's what we've done. Just be aware that anything you add into the background is static, so it stays still, doesn't move, and you just need to make that very clear to the students as well. So now we're going to animate. So I want to click on my first frame, and then we're going to choose a character to animate. So I think I'm going to choose my tiger. Okay, and my tiger can't be smaller than my parrot, so I'm going to make him a bit bigger, and I might even have him face the other way. So this button here allows you to face the other way. You've also got the rotate button, so you can spin a character, and if all goes horribly wrong like me, you've got that reset button, which will sort of take it factory reset that character. And there we go. So what I'm going to do is same as I did with my ball, but this time instead of sort of bouncing from the side, I'm just going to have my tiger moving to the side like this. So I'm going to click on my first frame. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to move to my second frame, and there's my lovely onion skinning tiger, and I'm going to stamp him slightly to the side, and again I'm going to keep doing that. So I'm going to next frame slightly to the side, next frame slightly to the side. And then I start using my green plus. So green plus, slightly to the side, green plus, slightly to the side. And there we go. Now, as the same with coding, I always used to get my children to program something or to do something and then to check what it looks like sort of intermittently. So I would tend to say to the children, you know, maybe 5-10 frames, make sure you press the play button, because what we don't want, so that's too fast. So we can slow that down. There we go. So that looks much better. But it just gives the children a chance to reflect and to fix anything before, you know, what you don't want is them creating sort of 100 frames and realizing the middle one they've gone horribly wrong, and it just all is a bit heartbreaking for them. So I just would tend to get them every sort of 5 or 10 frames, press the play button, see what it looks like, and make any corrections that you might need to. Now, what I will say is you can't move these frames, and that's why that process is really important. You can delete a frame, but you can't then reorder them. So this is designed to be a simple animation tool. So get them to, you know, I'm going to sound like a broken record, get them to animate 5 or 10 frames, press play, see what it looks like, and then move forwards. Now, what I will say is a slightly more advanced skill, but one that's quite important, is the ability to add in speech bubbles. Okay, so the speech bubbles, oh, my hand's gone. The clip art library is here, so you can open it up. There's speech bubbles and there's also text. So we can add a speech bubble. You can choose, there's lots of different varieties to choose from. So some of the coloured ones are quite nice. And there's a text box underneath. So we could say, I don't know, jungles are disappearing. And there we go. So that will add that text in. So we can make that a bit bigger so we can see what it says. And we can stamp that on the page. Now, what I would do is I would use that red plus button. So this is the freeze button. And I would use that for maybe 4 or 5 frames, and it will keep that speech bubble still so that the viewer can read it. So if we press play, here is our animation. And you can see that hasn't sort of jumped about. I might even need, actually looking at it, might need a couple more frames so that I've got time to read that. And that's a bit better. So then I can press stop. I can add another frame, and then I've got to find my tiger again. So I would need to go and open up my rainforest library, and I'm going to find my tiger, who is right at the bottom. There he is. And I would need to resize. So that's where your onion skinning is going to help. So we can resize our tiger and then move him to the side and carry on. Now, if you have got some really clever children, there's always one, you can start thinking about things like perspective, which I have had some year 2s that were able to do that. I think he was a bit of a unique character. But I did have one child that was able to have very small characters at the back. Then moving forwards, they got bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you do have those children that you want to challenge and push a little bit further, that is something that I would offer up as a suggestion. And there we go. So I'm going to have that as my jungle animation. Let's go Feb 25. And then I can hit my save button, and I've got my little saving circle and my saving button grays out. Okay, so that is the basics of animation. So hopefully that's been helpful. Feel free, if you feel like you've got enough out of the session, you feel free to head off, but I'm going to do all the exciting bit now. So this is one of my favorite things to, and it extends that animation into more of a project. Okay, so JIT Paint is how you can start creating not only your own characters, but you could create your own backgrounds as well. So you could create all the elements that you need for your animation. So you could have a session on drawing their own background, a session on creating their own characters, and then 2, maybe 3 sessions on actually animating that particular story, because animation is not a quick process. So I would always recommend about 2, maybe 3 lessons on actually creating the animation. But what we can do is we've got a background in JIT Paint that is called transparent. And this allows us to create these characters. So you can see these are 2 characters that, if you can't tell, that I've actually hand drawn. It's quite difficult when you're using a mouse, so be aware of that as well. If you do have access to iPads, this activity works really nicely with an iPad, especially if you've got maybe a stylus where they can actually do the drawing. With a mouse, it's much trickier. Even I find it difficult as an adult. So let's have a look, shall we? So I'm going to open up JIT Paint, which is here. Okay, and we're going to scroll down. So we've got our sort of templates option. We're going to scroll down, and it's here. Okay, so you may not have noticed it was there. And what's nice about this is it does already have a transparent background. So anything you draw here will save just the drawing in the middle. So I'm going to do this very quickly. I'm just going to draw a very quick teddy bear. Okay, so the teddy bear is my character in my book. There we go. I'm going to give it some little stick arms, some little stick legs. Oh, that went a bit wrong. So I've got my undo button. There we go. His little ears. Now just be aware, with the transparent background, anything white, if you save it, will remove the white. So if you do need like white eyes, I would use, I forgot to show you this, I would use the little colour dropper and make it a sort of off-white colour, and then it won't disappear. Okay, so that is off-white, and I can have 2 eyes, 1, 2. I might have blue, make that a bit smaller, lovely blue eyes, and then his little retina, there we go, and his little bear nose. And there we go. And I might give him a little pink tummy. And there we go. So there is our character. And then all I have to do, I mean, obviously I would save it. So that would save the paint file. So if the kids are doing this, that's a great way of, you know, if they did need to come back and edit that character at any time, they can. But to use it in JIT Animate, and this is a vital step. If they don't do this, they won't be able to use it in JIT Animate. The top right here is the Save As stamp. Okay, Save As image. So we can click that. And that is going to save. Okay, and that will save just a little teddy bear. So if I go back to animate now, and let's choose a park. So we've got our 3 bears, Goldilocks and the 3 bears, for example. So I can add in that character now, and that will be saved into, not into my stamps, into this button here. So can you see this little person button here? And there is my little character. So I can stamp my character and I can use it in my story. Okay, so they can add in multiple characters and animate. That is getting a little bit tricky when you're adding sort of more than one character. How I would do that is I would get them to animate one character for the full animation and then to add in the second character, because it helps, especially if they're resizing things and yeah, adding speech roles. So that's just a little pro tip for you. Just animate that one character first, but that is how you would create your own characters. And the same with your background. So if you did create your own background, for example, you could add that. So in this pictures tab, I'm trying to find, so here we go. So I created this image earlier. That is my image that I edited, so I've added in the bee, and I can add in that teddy bear from this button here. I'm not sure where is it gone. Let's try that again. Okay, so there is my bear, and there we go. I can start animating. So that's how you can add in your own characters, and that is how you can add in your own backgrounds using JIT Paint. And these are just a selection. So I've done a Gruffalo, I've done a very hungry caterpillar, I've done an Elmer. This little lad, we did this in the Christmas webinar. So this was taking a photograph in JIT Paint. So just to show you how this was done. So JIT Paint. So at this point, again, I chose the transparent background. So let's choose that. There we go. And then I go to this area here, and you've got the option to take picture. So the children would probably need to do that in in pairs, where one holds the iPad. I would generally do this with an iPad. You click and take a photograph, and then you can sort of erase around it. So that's how we would do that. That's quite a tricky one. I would probably have that for the older students, but you can do it, and then you can draw or add clip art over the top and save that as an image. And that's an AI PNG that I pasted into my files and then use that in JIT Paint. So you can start using, if you are starting to play around with AI at all, you can do that. I can't remember which one I used. I think it was Google, I think, or possibly Copilot or something, or Canva. It might have been Canva. Okay, last little bit. So presenting your animation. So JIT Mix is a great way to kind of stitch all these animations together, because what you won't be able to do, and I had this question quite a lot, is can I have different scenes in my animation? And the short answer is no. We don't have that functionality because we want it to be a simple animation tool. So there are workarounds. So you could potentially, depending on your capabilities and the students' capabilities, the students' ages, you can export those animations as GIFs and then add them in to a video editing tool if you wanted to. But this would probably be my solution, is to add your content into a JIT Mix. And it allows you to create an ebook. So you could have a page with animations, and so it's, you know, just a page of it's just a book of animations. So each scene will be on a different page. You could also include other content, so it doesn't have to just be animation content. It can be any JIT content. So it could be that they create their own illustrations in terms of paintings, animations. They could even use things like Turtle to, illustrate their story. So it allows you to adjust different page formats, to add text. You can use text to speech, and you also have the option to open in view mode. So this just gives you an example. So we've got my Gruffalo story. I can use text to speech, top right.
The Gruffalo by Miss Kimball.
And that is going to say anything that's typed on the page. This is a JIT Write that I've added. This is a JIT Paint. And then we've got our JIT Animate that we can play. So we've got our Gruffalo recount. So we've got our mouse, our fox saying the usual. It's wonderfully kind of you, fox, but no, I'm going to have tea with a Gruffalo. Okay, so you can recount, obviously, familiar stories. So just to show you how that was done, Mix is within JIT. So it's our ebook creator. And the first thing you need to do is to choose a page layout, first of all. So we've got just tool on its own, tool with text underneath, tool with text to the right, and then 4 different. So I would possibly use these 3. I wouldn't use this one. So for the front page, probably use a paint, or you can choose a different tool. So if it was the animate tool, you click until you find pink. So whatever color is here will correlate with the tab. So we want an animate page, for example. And then you can animate straight onto this if you wanted to, or you've got these buttons at the top. So we've got that is to load in a background, but this one is to load a pre-existing animation. So there is that animation that we've just created in Animate. There is that ball one. But you as a teacher, you can create a pupil from pupil files. So it could be that each child creates their own scene, and so you can stitch that together in a mix. But let's go with my files. I'm going to click in Jungle Animations, and that will play right there. And then I can add a title into and there we go. And I can add additional pages. So it could be that I now have an animation that I just want to add on its own with nothing around it. And again, I can animate straight onto that page. I've got the option to add in backgrounds, or I can load an existing animation. So here we'll add in Lottie's bee animation that she created. And we've got our bee that goes from flower to flower. And then I can hit save, same as I do with all my other JIT tools. That's going to save. The children can add an additional page with each lesson if they wanted to. As I said, you as a teacher can stitch all of those pupil files together, a separate page, and have maybe a class animation book. So that's an option as well. Then the last thing I want to do before I start wrapping up, all of that content saves into your My Files. So as a user, so you can see there's that mix that we just created, there's the teddy bear, there's the jungle animation. Your pupils content will save into the pupil files, and this will work exactly the same whether we're looking at pupil files or My Files. So for example, I want to open this in view only. Okay, what I can do is I can go to that little green eye, and I've got open in view mode. So if I click that, that's going to open that mixed document without being able to edit anything. So this is a really nice way you can, copy that that URL. Any animations will play. There we go. And the pages will turn quite nicely. I don't know why that's loaded without a background. Shouldn't have. Odd. Let's refresh that page, see if that fixes it. No, it's very strange. But there we go. So that will open view, and you can share that URL with people to be able to view that. So that is an option as well. Okay. Right. Bang on the money, 4:15. I promise I'll be done by 4:15. A few little things just to wrap up, and I am going to open the Q&A. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to add them into the chat. But these are our social media details. So we're on Facebook X. So just look for Just Too Easy. We are there. This is our email address. So edteam@j2e.com. Please feel free to drop us an email. We are doing a live lesson that is directly linked to what we've covered in today's webinar. So we're going to look at jungle animations using JIT Animate. So that will be me teaching your children for you. So that is on the 3rd of March. I think that is a Monday. It's a week today, I do believe, 11 till 11:45. You can book that via the teachers area. So that and all of our other training and all of our other live lessons will be featured in our teachers area, which you may not have noticed as appeared on your Launchpad. You can find what's on here, and this is our existing content that is pre-recorded. So this webinar and all of my other webinars. So if you haven't had enough of me talking at you, you can have me on demand if you really want to. So you can look at our YouTube channel. There's also the ability to book in a 15-minute appointment, find any FAQs, and there's also a get started area. So please feel free to book on any of our webinars and live lessons that we've got coming up. I have 5 live lessons next week, so I will be very tired. Specifically for my COBIS schools out there, if you have any questions related to accounts or onboarding your users, you will need to make sure that your users are onboarded before you carry out the competition. You can email office@j2e.com. Any other questions, you can point those at Charlie. So that is charlie@j2e.com. And then finally, I'm going to see if we've got any questions. So I hope you've enjoyed the session. I have enjoyed delivering this one. I feel like I should have had an hour, but you know, you live and learn. But please feel free to add any questions that you have into the chat and I will happily answer them. If not, thank you ever so much for giving up your very precious time. I know how important time is when you're a teacher. And I hope you have a wonderful evening.